The lawyer's briefcase made a soft thud as it landed on my kitchen table. The sound somehow final, like a judge's gavel sealing my fate. Margaret Chen had kind eyes behind her wire-rimmed glasses, but they couldn't hide the gravity of what she was about to tell me. She slid a manila folder across the polished wood surface, her fingers lingering on it as if reluctant to let go. "Mrs. Holloway, I need you to prepare yourself for what you're about to see. Your husband Daniel maintained a second household for the past 7 years." The words hung in the air like smoke, refusing to dissipate. I stared at the folder, my hands frozen in my lap, unable to reach for it. 7 years. Our daughter Emma was 8. The math did itself in my head before I could stop it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I'm Rebecca Holloway, 51 years old, and until that Tuesday afternoon in late September, I thought I knew exactly who I was. I was a clinical pharmacist at Portland Memorial Hospital, a position I'd held for 23 years. I was the mother of Emma, a bright and curious third grader who collected rocks and wanted to be a paleontologist. I was the wife of Daniel Holloway, a successful commercial real estate developer who traveled frequently for work. Or at least that's what I believed his travels were for. Margaret cleared her throat gently, pulling me back from the spiral of thoughts threatening to consume me. "I know this is overwhelming. Take your time." But I didn't want time. Time had already stolen 7 years from me, 7 years of lies and deception. I reached forward and flipped open the folder. The first photograph showed a modest 2-story house in what looked like a suburban neighborhood, white siding with blue shutters, a neat lawn, a basketball hoop in the driveway. Nothing remarkable, nothing that would make you look twice. "This property is located in Beaverton, about 40 minutes from here," Margaret explained. "It's registered under an LLC that your husband controls, but the utility bills and property taxes have been paid from a separate account that he maintained without your knowledge." I flipped to the next photograph and felt my breath catch in my throat. It wasn't the image of another woman that stopped me, though she was there, younger than me by perhaps 15 years, with auburn hair and a tired smile. It wasn't even the sight of 2 children standing beside her, a boy who looked about 12 and a girl maybe 10 years old. What made my hands start to shake was the boy's face. I knew that face. I had made that boy countless after-school snacks. I had driven him to soccer practice alongside my own daughter. I had watched him grow from a small shy first grader into the lanky preteen in this photograph. "That's Oliver," I whispered. "That's Emma's best friend." Margaret's expression shifted from professional sympathy to confusion. "I'm sorry, what?" I pointed at the boy with a trembling finger. "Oliver Hartley. He's been Emma's best friend since first grade. His mother is Rachel Hartley. She's a dental hygienist. She's a single mother. At least that's what she told us. What everyone at the school believed. The implications crashed over me in waves. Every playdate, every birthday party, every parent-teacher conference where Rachel and I had stood side by side, discussing our children's progress. Every casual conversation about the challenges of raising kids, during which she had commiserated about doing it alone. The soccer games where Daniel had coached both Emma and Oliver, ruffling the boy's hair with the same affection he showed our daughter. "Mrs. Holloway," Margaret said carefully, "the woman in these photographs is indeed Rachel Hartley. According to the financial records I've uncovered, your husband has been supporting this household entirely. Mortgage payments, living expenses, the children's school tuition, everything." I forced myself to look at the next photograph. This one showed Daniel standing in the driveway of that house, his arm around Rachel's waist, the 2 children flanking them. They looked like a family portrait, like something you'd frame and put on the mantel. The girl in the photo, who I now realized must be Oliver's sister, had Daniel's eyes. The same pale blue that Emma had inherited. The same eyes that had looked at me across the breakfast table that very morning. Daniel asking if I needed him to pick anything up from the store on his way home from his meeting. His meeting. How many meetings had actually been visits to this other house, this other family? "How did you find out about this?" I asked, my voice sounding distant and strange to my own ears. Margaret pulled out a legal pad covered in notes. "Your husband's business partner, Thomas Brennan, came to me 3 weeks ago. He and Daniel had a falling out over some property deals. and Thomas became concerned about financial irregularities in their company. During his investigation, he discovered the separate accounts and the Beaverton property. Thomas felt you had a right to know before he moved forward with dissolving the partnership. I remembered Thomas, a barrel-chested man with a booming laugh who had been at our house for countless dinner parties. He had been Daniel's friend and business partner for over a decade. What kind of rift would make a man betray his partner's secret? Thomas is prepared to testify about what he found if this goes to divorce proceedings, Margaret continued. He's also provided me with detailed financial records that show a pattern of deception going back 7 years. The amounts are substantial, Mrs. Holloway. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars diverted from what should have been marital assets. I pushed the photographs away, unable to look at them anymore. My kitchen, with its cheerful yellow walls and the finger paintings Emma had made in kindergarten still stuck to the refrigerator, suddenly felt like a stage set, a false front hiding the real story happening elsewhere. Does Emma know Oliver's father? I asked, already knowing the answer but needing to hear it confirmed. According to what I've been able to piece together, Oliver and his sister Zoe have been told that their father works overseas, that he travels constantly for business and can only visit occasionally. Rachel apparently maintained the fiction of being a single mother to everyone outside that household. Your husband would visit them when he claimed to be on business trips or working late at the office. The audacity of it was staggering. Daniel hadn't just maintained a second family. He had woven that family into our lives, making our daughter best friends with his other son, creating a situation where the two families orbited around each other, while one remained completely ignorant of the connection. I need to see more, I said, pulling the folder back toward me. I need to understand the full scope of this. Over the next hour, Margaret walked me through a paper trail that revealed a double life so intricate it bordered on genius in its construction. Daniel had created the LLC that owned the Beaverton house 6 months before Rachel became pregnant with Oliver. He had set up automatic payments for everything, ensuring that Rachel never had to worry about money, while maintaining complete control over the finances. He had listed himself as a silent investor in Rachel's dental practice, giving him a legitimate reason to visit her during business hours. The travel schedule he had maintained was a masterpiece of deception. Real business trips were extended by a day or two, with the extra time spent in Beaverton. Late nights at the office were often actually nights at the other house. Weekend conferences that I had never questioned were sometimes completely fabricated. Margaret showed me credit card statements that painted a picture of 2 separate lives lived with equal investment. Groceries purchased in Beaverton. Clothes bought for children whose names I was just learning. Family outings to places Daniel claimed he was scouting for potential development projects. Tuition payments for a private school I had never heard of. The total amount diverted from your marital assets over the past 7 years is approximately $640,000, Margaret said, her voice taking on a harder edge. This doesn't include the current value of the Beaverton property, or the investments he made in Rachel's dental practice. If we pursue this aggressively, you could potentially recover a significant portion of these funds, plus additional damages for the deception. But I wasn't thinking about money. I was thinking about Oliver's face at Emma's last birthday party, the way he had looked at Daniel with such unguarded affection when my husband had organized a treasure hunt for the kids. I was thinking about the times Rachel had declined invitations to adult gatherings, always claiming she was too tired or too busy, and how I had admired her dedication to her children while secretly pitying her for doing it all alone. I was thinking about the time 2 years ago when Oliver had been hospitalized with appendicitis, and Emma had been so worried that Daniel had driven her to the hospital to visit. I had stayed home, thinking it was sweet that my husband was so supportive of our daughter's friendship. Now I wondered if he had spent that night at the hospital as a father, not just as a family friend. Mrs. Holloway, I need to know how you want to proceed, Margaret said gently. I can file for divorce immediately, seek emergency orders regarding assets in custody, and begin building a case for maximum recovery. But I need your authorization to move forward. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 3:15. Emma would be getting out of school in half an hour, and Daniel was supposed to pick her up and take her to her piano lesson. Or at least, that was the plan he had shared with me at breakfast. Was it really a piano lesson, or was there something else scheduled, some other obligation to his other family that I knew nothing about? Don't file anything yet, I said slowly. I need time to process this. And I need to understand something first. Margaret raised an eyebrow. What do you need to understand? I gathered the photographs, looking at each one carefully. Rachel wasn't particularly beautiful, not in any conventional sense. She looked tired in most of the pictures, her smile genuine but worn around the edges. The children looked happy and well cared for. The house was modest, comfortable, nothing extravagant. This wasn't a story of a man keeping a glamorous mistress in a luxury apartment. This was something else, something that felt almost more painful because of its ordinariness. I need to understand why, I said. I need to understand how a man maintains 2 entire families, loves 2 sets of children, and never shows a crack in either facade. I need to know if there were signs I missed.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Or if he's simply that good at compartmentalizing his life. Margaret began gathering her documents, preparing to leave. Mrs. Holloway, in my experience, men like your husband are exceptionally skilled at leading double lives precisely because they believe their own justifications. They convince themselves that they're not really hurting anyone, that they're actually being generous by taking care of multiple families. They create mental walls between their different lives and never let those walls come down. After she left, I sat alone in my kitchen, the folder of evidence still open on the table. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, illuminating dust motes in the air, making everything look hazy and unreal. In 2 hours, Daniel would walk through that door, probably with some story about his day, some anecdote about a property deal or a difficult client. He would kiss my cheek, ask about my shift at the hospital, and inquire about what was for dinner. He would do all of this while carrying the weight of his other life, his other family, and he would do it without a single visible strain. I thought about confronting him immediately, throwing the photographs in his face and watching his careful construct crumble. But something stopped me. Margaret had shown me evidence of financial deception, of a secret family, of lies that had spanned 7 years. But she hadn't shown me why. She hadn't explained how Rachel, who I had known for years, had never once slipped up, never once revealed the truth. She hadn't explained how Oliver, a 12-year-old boy, had maintained the fiction of an absent father when that father was coaching his soccer team and attending his best friend's birthday parties. There was something more here, something deeper than simple infidelity or even the maintenance of a double life. And I was going to find out what it was before I made any decisions about how to proceed. I carefully placed all the photographs and documents back in the folder and carried it upstairs to my home office. I locked it in the filing cabinet where I kept our important papers, hiding the evidence of my husband's betrayal among the tax returns and insurance policies and birth certificates. Then I went to the bathroom and stared at my reflection in the mirror. Rebecca Holloway looked back at me, a woman with graying blonde hair pulled into a practical ponytail, with lines around her eyes from years of smiling, with capable hands that had filled thousands of prescriptions and wiped away countless tears from her daughter's cheeks. She looked like someone who had life figured out, someone who made good decisions and built a stable home. She looked like a fool. I washed my face, reapplied my lipstick, and went downstairs to start dinner. Because whatever happened next, Emma still needed to eat, and I still needed to be her mother. The rest could wait until I understood the full truth of what had been done to me and why. The chicken was in the oven and I was chopping vegetables for a salad when I heard Emma's voice calling from the front door. She burst into the kitchen with her usual whirlwind energy, her backpack sliding off one shoulder, her dark hair escaping from its ponytail in wild curls. "Mom, guess what happened at school today?" She didn't wait for me to guess, launching into an elaborate story about a science experiment that had gone wrong in the most spectacular way, complete with dramatic gestures and sound effects. I listened and smiled and asked appropriate questions, all while watching Daniel over her shoulder as he hung his jacket in the hallway closet. He looked exactly as he always did. Tall and solid at 53, with silver threading through his dark hair in a way that somehow made him more distinguished rather than old. He wore the casual business attire that was his uniform, dress pants and a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. His smile was warm and genuine as he watched Emma's animated storytelling. There was no guilt in his expression, no discomfort, no sign that he had just come from another family, or that his entire life was built on deception. "That sounds amazing, sweetheart. he said when Emma paused for breath. Did you take any pictures of the aftermath? Emma groaned. Mr. Peterson wouldn't let us. He said we needed to clean up immediately before the principal came by. But Oliver got some video on his phone before we had to put everything away. He's going to send it to me tonight. At the mention of Oliver's name, I watched Daniel's face carefully. There was a flicker of something, a micro-expression so brief I might have imagined it, but his smile never wavered. That's great, honey. Why don't you go get started on your homework before dinner? After Emma thundered up the stairs, Daniel came into the kitchen and kissed my cheek, exactly as I had anticipated. How was your day? He asked, reaching around me to steal a piece of the bell pepper I was chopping. Fine, I said, keeping my voice level. Same as always. How was your meeting? He launched into a story about a potential property acquisition in downtown Portland, detailing zoning complications and financing challenges with the easy confidence of someone who had nothing to hide. I let him talk, watching his hands as he gestured, noting the way he leaned against the counter with comfortable familiarity. This was my husband, the man I had shared a bed with for 16 years of marriage, the father of my child, and he was a stranger. Actually, he said as his story wound down, I might need to take a trip to Seattle next week. There's a project up there that needs some attention, probably 3 or 4 days. Would that be a problem with your schedule? 3 or 4 days. I wondered if there was really a project in Seattle, or if this was another fiction, another excuse to spend time with his other family. That should be fine, I said. I'll check with Linda about swapping a shift if needed. He smiled and squeezed my shoulder. You're the best. I don't know what I'd do without you. The casual cruelty of that statement, delivered without any awareness of its irony, made something harden inside my chest. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew I couldn't simply confront him and watch him scramble for explanations. I needed to understand the full architecture of his deception before I decided how to dismantle it. Over dinner, Emma chattered about her plans for an upcoming school project with Oliver, something about the solar system that would require poster board and a lot of glitter. Can Oliver come over this weekend to work on it? She asked. His mom said it was okay if it was okay with you. I felt Daniel's attention sharpen slightly, though his expression remained relaxed. Of course, I said. Maybe Saturday afternoon? Emma beamed. Perfect. Oliver said his mom might drop him off on her way to run errands. She's been super busy at work lately. I looked directly at Daniel. Rachel does work so hard, doesn't she? It must be exhausting, managing everything on her own. His eyes met mine for just a moment, and I saw it, a flash of something that might have been caution or calculation. But his voice was utterly sincere when he responded. She's an impressive woman. Single parents don't get enough credit for what they manage. The table fell silent except for the sound of forks against plates. Emma, oblivious to any undercurrent, was already planning the elaborate solar system model in her head, muttering about which planets should be which colors. After dinner, while Daniel helped Emma with her math homework, I retreated to my office and opened my laptop. If I was going to understand the full scope of this situation, I needed to do my own investigation. I started with social media, something I rarely used but which seemed like a logical place to begin. Rachel Hartley's Facebook profile was set to private, but her profile picture showed her with Oliver and Zoe, all three smiling at the camera. The photo had been taken at a beach, probably somewhere along the Oregon coast. I could see Daniel's influence in the way the children were dressed, in the quality of the camera that had captured the image. Nothing about Rachel's online presence suggested anything but exactly what she claimed to be, a single mother working hard to raise 2 children. I searched for Oliver next, finding his profile equally locked down, as it should be for a 12-year-old. But his profile picture showed him in a soccer uniform, number 7, the same number Emma wore on her team, the same team Daniel coached. I sat back in my chair thinking, Rachel had been part of our community for years. She volunteered at the school, attended soccer games, participated in fundraisers. She had been to our house multiple times for playdates and pickups. How had she managed to look me in the eye, knowing what she knew and never revealed the truth? Then again, how had Daniel done the same thing? I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my photos, looking for images from the past few years. There were dozens of pictures of Emma and Oliver together, Two kids growing up side by side, completely unaware that they were half-siblings. Birthday parties, Halloween costumes, soccer team photos. In several pictures, Daniel had his arms around both children, treating them with equal affection. In one photo from last summer's team barbecue, Rachel stood in the background, watching Daniel interact with the kids. Her expression was complicated, something between pride and sadness and resignation. I had noticed it at the time and assumed she was feeling wistful about Oliver not having a father figure around. Now I understood she was watching her partner, her children's father, pretending to be nothing more than a friendly coach. A text message buzzed on my phone, pulling me from my thoughts. It was from Margaret Chen. Checking in. Have you decided how you want to proceed? I can have papers ready by morning if you want to move forward. I stared at the message for a long moment before responding. Not yet. I need more information first. Can you find out everything about how Daniel and Rachel met? I need to understand the timeline. Her response came quickly. We'll dig deeper. Be careful, Rebecca. Men like this can be dangerous when cornered. I almost laughed at that. Dangerous. Daniel had never raised a hand to me, never even raised his voice. He was known in our community as a thoughtful, generous man who coached youth soccer and donated to local charities. But maybe Margaret was right. Maybe the most dangerous thing about Daniel wasn't any potential for violence, but his ability to make people believe in a version of reality that served his purposes while concealing the truth underneath. That night, lying in bed beside my husband, I listened to his breathing even out as he fell asleep. He had kissed me goodnight, told me he loved me, and drifted off without any apparent concern. I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how many other nights he had done this same thing after spending time with Rachel, after tucking Oliver and Zoe into bed, after living an entirely different life just 40 minutes away. I thought about waking him up, demanding answers, forcing a confrontation that would shatter the careful equilibrium he had maintained. But I didn't, because I realized that Margaret was wrong about one thing. I didn't need to know why Daniel had done this, at least not from him. Men who lead double lives are experts at justification, at spinning narratives that make their actions seem reasonable or even noble. Whatever explanation Daniel would offer would be carefully constructed to minimize his culpability and maximize my sympathy. No, if I wanted the truth, I needed to get it from someone who had no reason to protect him anymore. I needed to talk to Rachel Hartley, and I needed to do it in a way that wouldn't alert Daniel to what I knew until I was ready to act on that knowledge. The plan formed slowly in my mind as the night crept toward dawn. It would require careful timing and a performance worthy of the deception that had been practiced on me for 7 years. But if I could pull it off, I would finally understand not just what had happened but why. And more importantly, I would understand exactly who Rachel Hartley was and what role she had played in destroying my marriage, all while pretending to be my friend. Tomorrow I would start gathering the pieces of this puzzle. And when I finally had them all, I would decide how to put them together in a way that served justice, not just for me, but for Emma, who deserved better than to discover her entire childhood had been built on lies. For now, though, I lay in the darkness beside my sleeping husband and let the anger that had been building all evening settle into something colder and more useful: determination. Daniel Holloway thought he had built the perfect double life, but he had made one critical mistake. He had brought his two families together, had made them friends, had woven them so tightly that discovering the truth about one meant unraveling everything about the other. And I was very good at unraveling complicated problems. It was what made me an excellent pharmacist, the ability to look at multiple medications and interactions and side effects and see the patterns that others might miss. This situation was just another kind of prescription that needed filling, another problem that needed solving. I just needed to figure out the right dosage of truth to administer, and to whom to get the outcome I wanted. By the time morning light began filtering through the curtains, I had the beginnings of a plan. It would take time and patience, but I had plenty of both. And unlike Daniel, who had to maintain multiple complicated fictions, I had the advantage of knowing the truth. Now I just needed to use it. The morning routine proceeded exactly as it always had, with Emma rushing through breakfast while trying to finish her math homework at the same time, and Daniel scanning real estate listings on his tablet between sips of coffee. I moved through the familiar choreography of our mornings, packing Emma's lunch, finding the permission slip she needed signed, reminding her about her piano lesson after school. Everything appeared normal because I made it appear normal, but beneath the surface my mind was working through the logistics of what needed to happen next. After dropping Emma at school, I didn't go directly to the hospital for my shift. Instead, I drove to a coffee shop 3 blocks from Rachel's dental practice and parked where I had a clear view of the entrance. It was 9:30 in the morning, early enough that Rachel would likely still be seeing her first patients of the day. I wasn't ready to confront her yet, but I needed to watch her, to see if I could detect any sign of the massive deception she had been maintaining. Through the large front windows of the dental office, I could occasionally glimpse movement, figures in scrubs moving between rooms. The sign on the door listed Rachel Hartley as one of 3 hygienists working in the practice. According to Margaret's research, Daniel had invested $75,000 in this practice 3 years ago, positioning himself as a silent partner who wanted to support small businesses in the community. The cover story was perfect, because it gave him a legitimate reason to visit the office, to have meetings with Rachel, to be involved in her professional life without raising suspicions. My phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. Found some interesting background. Rachel Hartley was Rachel Morrison before her marriage 8 years ago. Divorced from Brian Morrison when Oliver was 3 years old. Morrison remarried and moved to Arizona. No custody disputes, very clean separation. Rachel resumed using her maiden name Hartley after the divorce. I read the message twice, processing this new information. So Rachel had been married to someone else when she met Daniel. The timeline suggested that Daniel had entered her life shortly after her divorce, when she was vulnerable and probably struggling financially as a newly single mother. Another text from Margaret arrived. Here's where it gets interesting. Brian Morrison's divorce filing cited irreconcilable differences, but discovery documents show he suspected infidelity. He withdrew the accusation as part of the settlement agreement. Guess who Rachel's employer was at the time? Holloway Development Group. She worked as an administrative assistant in your husband's office. The coffee in my cup had gone cold, but I barely noticed. Rachel had worked for Daniel. She hadn't just been some random woman he had met. She had been his employee, someone who depended on him for her livelihood, someone who would have been in a position of vulnerability when he decided to pursue a relationship with her. I thought about the power dynamics involved, the way Daniel could have positioned himself as a rescuer, a successful man who saw something special in a struggling single mother working as his assistant. The manipulation required to turn that professional relationship into something personal while keeping it hidden from everyone, including me, suggested a level of calculation I hadn't fully appreciated until now. Another message from Margaret. One more thing. Rachel left her position at Holloway Development 6 months before Oliver was born. Her departure was listed as voluntary resignation, but the timing suggests she was already pregnant and Daniel wanted her out of the office before anyone could notice. I started the car and drove away from the dental office, my mind racing with implications. This wasn't a story of 2 people who had fallen accidentally in love. This was a story of a man in a position of power who had deliberately cultivated a relationship with a vulnerable employee, gotten her pregnant, and then spent the next 7 years maintaining the fiction that she was a single mother, while he played the role of generous friend and community member. The hospital parking lot was nearly full when I arrived, forcing me to park in the far corner. I sat in my car for several minutes, trying to compose myself before going inside. My shift started in 20 minutes, and I would spend the next 8 hours filling prescriptions, consulting with patients, and maintaining the professional demeanor that my job required. But every interaction would be colored by the knowledge of what was happening in my personal life, the way every seemingly normal moment with Daniel and Emma was actually part of an elaborate performance. Inside the pharmacy, my colleague David was already processing the morning orders, his fingers flying across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. He looked up when I entered and gave me a concerned look. "You okay, Rebecca? You look like you didn't sleep much." I forced a smile. "Just a headache. I'll be fine once I get some caffeine in me." The lie came easily, too easily. I wondered if this was how it had started for Daniel, with small deceptions that became easier with practice until maintaining multiple contradictory realities felt natural. The morning passed in a blur of prescription bottles and patient consultations. A woman picking up medication for her elderly father asked about potential interactions with his other prescriptions, and I walked her through the details with the kind of careful attention that had made me good at my job. A young mother needed advice about safe pain relief while breastfeeding, and I provided options while silently wondering if Rachel had come to this same pharmacy when she was pregnant with Oliver, if I had perhaps even filled prescriptions for her without knowing she was carrying my husband's child. During my lunch break, I called the elementary school and asked to speak with the counselor, Linda Martinez, who had been there since Emma started kindergarten. Linda and I had developed a friendly relationship over the years, bonding over our shared commitment to helping children navigate the complicated social dynamics of elementary school. "Rebecca, hi," Linda said warmly when she picked up. "Is everything okay with Emma?" I had prepared this conversation carefully, knowing I needed information but couldn't reveal too much about what I had discovered. "Emma's fine, but I wanted to ask you about something. You know how close she and Oliver Hartley have become. I'm just wondering if you've noticed anything unusual about their friendship, or about Oliver's home situation that I should be aware of." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "That's an interesting question. Can I ask what prompted it?" I had my answer ready. Rachel mentioned that Oliver's been having some questions about his father lately, asking more about why he's not around. "I just want to make sure Emma's equipped to be a good friend if Oliver's going through something difficult." Linda sighed softly. "Oliver's a resilient kid, but yes, I have noticed some things over the years. He's asked questions in our friendship circles about different types of families, about what it means when a parent is absent. Rachel's been very open with the school about her situation, very clear that Oliver's father isn't in the picture by mutual agreement." Mutual agreement. I wondered whose agreement that really was, or if it was just another story Daniel had crafted. "Has Oliver ever mentioned his father visiting or being in contact?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Not that I'm aware of. Rachel's been consistent about that narrative. Oliver seems to have accepted that his father works overseas and they don't have a relationship. Though I will say, and this is just observation, Oliver seems particularly attached to male authority figures. He gravitates toward the male teachers, toward coaches like your husband. It's not unusual for boys without fathers in the home, but it's noticeable." The irony of that observation hit me like a physical blow. Oliver was gravitating toward Daniel because some part of him recognized what he was missing, even if he didn't consciously know that Daniel was his father. The bond between them that I had thought was simply the natural affection between a coach and a player was actually something deeper, a biological connection expressing itself despite all the lies meant to hide it. After thanking Linda and ending the call, I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot and let myself feel the full weight of what I was uncovering. This wasn't just about Daniel's betrayal or Rachel's complicity. This was about two children who were being denied the truth of their relationship, who were best friends without knowing they were siblings, who were growing up in a carefully constructed lie that would eventually have to come crashing down. The afternoon shift was busier than the morning, a steady stream of patients picking up medications and asking questions. I moved through it mechanically, my hands performing familiar tasks while my mind was elsewhere. Around 3 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Can you pick up Emma from piano? Something came up at work, running late." I stared at the message, wondering if there really was something at work, or if this was another excuse to spend time with his other family. I texted back a simple affirmation and made a note to leave the hospital 15 minutes early. As I was preparing to clock out, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize with a local area code. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mrs. Holloway?" The voice on the other end was female, nervous, and vaguely familiar. "This is Rachel Hartley. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." My heart began pounding so hard I was certain she could hear it through the phone. "Rachel, hi. No, this is fine. What can I do for you?" There was a pause and I could hear her breathing, gathering courage for whatever she was about to say. "I received a strange call today from someone claiming to be a private investigator asking questions about my relationship with your husband. I wanted to reach out directly because I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding, or maybe even a scam." The private investigator. Margaret must have contacted Rachel as part of her investigation. I felt a surge of anger at my attorney for taking that step without consulting me first, but I kept my voice carefully neutral. "That's odd. What kind of questions were they asking?" Rachel's voice trembled slightly. Questions about Daniel's investments in the dental practice, about how long we've known each other, about Oliver and Zoe. Mrs. Holloway, I want to assure you that my relationship with your husband is strictly professional. He's been an investor and mentor, nothing more. I'm calling because I know how these things can be twisted, and I wouldn't want any misunderstanding to affect Emma and Oliver's friendship. The performance was masterful, and I might have believed it if I hadn't seen the photographs of her standing in that driveway with Daniel's arm around her waist, if I hadn't known about the 7 years of financial support, if I hadn't understood the full scope of the deception. But even knowing all of that, I found myself impressed by her ability to deliver the lie with such apparent sincerity. I appreciate you calling, I said carefully. I'm sure it's just some kind of confusion. You know how people can be, always looking for drama where there isn't any. Rachel's relief was audible. Thank you for understanding. I've worked so hard to build a stable life for my children, and the last thing I need is baseless rumors affecting our reputation in the community. Your husband has been nothing but generous and professional, and I'd hate for anyone to misconstrue that. We talked for a few more minutes about innocuous topics, Emma and Oliver's solar system project, upcoming school events, the usual small talk that passed between mothers at pickup and drop-off. Through it all, Rachel maintained the fiction perfectly, never once giving any indication that she was speaking to the wife of her children's father, to a woman whose life she had helped destroy through years of lies. When I finally ended the call and sat back in my car, I realized something important. Rachel's decision to call me directly wasn't just about maintaining her cover. It was a warning shot, a message that she knew someone was investigating, and that she was prepared to defend her position. It also meant she probably hadn't told Daniel about the call yet, or he would have already reached out to me with some explanation. This gave me a narrow window of opportunity to act before they could coordinate their stories. I drove to Emma's piano lesson and arrived just as she was finishing her practice session. Through the window, I could see her small fingers moving across the keys, her face scrunched in concentration. She looked so young, so innocent, completely unaware that her entire understanding of her family was about to be upended. Mrs. Patterson, Emma's piano teacher, caught my eye and gave me a thumbs up, signaling that Emma had done well in her lesson. I returned the gesture automatically, maintaining the normal parent-teacher interaction, while my mind spun with plans and possibilities. On the drive home, Emma chattered about the new song she was learning, some classical piece that she found frustratingly difficult, but was determined to master. Mrs. Patterson says I have good instincts, but I need to practice my timing, Emma said. She says timing is everything in music. If you're off by even a little bit, the whole song sounds wrong. Timing is everything. The phrase echoed in my mind. The timing of when to confront Daniel, when to reveal what I knew, when to expose the lies that had shaped all of our lives. If I moved too quickly, he would have time to construct new deceptions. If I waited too long, he might discover that I knew and take steps to protect himself financially or legally. At home, I started dinner while Emma spread her homework across the kitchen table. Daniel arrived just after 6, looking slightly disheveled but smiling, carrying a bag from the Italian restaurant we all loved. Thought we could use a break from cooking, he said, setting out containers of pasta and salad. Long day for everyone. Emma cheered at the sight of her favorite fettuccine, and we settled around the table in a scene of domestic contentment that would have seemed perfect to any outside observer. Daniel asked about Emma's piano lesson and my day at the hospital, playing the role of attentive husband and father with the ease of long practice. I watched him across the table and tried to reconcile this man, who was carefully cutting Emma's pasta into smaller pieces and laughing at her story about a classmate's mishap in art class, with the man who had maintained a second family for 7 years. How did those two versions of Daniel Holloway exist in the same person? After dinner, while Emma was upstairs doing her homework, I brought Daniel a beer and sat down beside him on the couch. He looked surprised but pleased at this moment of casual intimacy, something that had become less frequent as our lives had grown busier. Thanks, he said, taking a sip. Everything okay? You seem a little distant today. The irony of him noticing my distance while maintaining his massive deception wasn't lost on me. Just thinking about things, I said carefully. About how quickly Emma's growing up, how much life is changing. Sometimes I worry we're not paying enough attention to the important things. Daniel nodded, putting his arm around my shoulders in a gesture of comfort. I know what you mean. Time moves faster than we realize. But I think we're doing okay, don't you? Emma's happy we're stable. We've built a good life here. A good life built on lies. I wanted to scream it at him, to shatter his comfortable delusion, but instead I leaned into his shoulder and let him believe everything was fine. I got a strange call today, I said, keeping my voice conversational. From Rachel Hartley. She said someone called claiming to be a private investigator, asking questions about your business relationship. Do you know anything about that? I felt Daniel's body tense slightly, though his voice remained casual when he responded. That's weird. Probably some kind of scam. You know how it is, people trying to dig up dirt on local businesses, hoping to find something they can use for a lawsuit or extortion. I wouldn't worry about it. He was good, I had to give him that. The explanation was plausible and delivered with just the right amount of dismissiveness to discourage further questions. If I hadn't known the truth, I would have accepted it without a second thought. Rachel seemed pretty shaken up, I continued. She wanted to make sure I knew that your relationship was purely professional, that there weren't any misunderstandings. Daniel took another sip of his beer, and I could almost see his mind working behind his eyes, calculating how much I might know, whether this was a genuine concern or something more dangerous. Well, she's right. We've had a good professional relationship. I invested in the dental practice because it seemed like a solid opportunity, and she's been a reliable partner. But that's all it is. The lies flowed so smoothly, with such practiced ease, that I wondered how many times he had rehearsed these explanations, preparing for the day when someone might ask uncomfortable questions. Thomas called me earlier, I said, introducing another element to see how Daniel would react. This was a lie, but I needed to see if the mention of his former business partner would crack his composure. Daniel's expression hardened slightly. What did Thomas want? The edge in his voice was new, a crack in the pleasant facade he usually maintained. He said he needed to talk to me about some business matters. I told him to call you directly, that I wasn't involved in your company affairs. Daniel set down his beer and turned to face me more directly. Thomas and I are having some disagreements about the direction of the company. He's trying to drag you into it, which is completely inappropriate. If he calls again, just ignore him. Better yet, don't answer at all. This was the most agitation I had seen from Daniel in months, maybe years. The mention of Thomas had genuinely unsettled him, which meant he knew or suspected that his former partner might have shared information about his double life. Is everything okay with the business? I asked, playing the concerned wife. Should I be worried about our finances? Daniel's expression softened, and he took my hand. Everything's fine. Thomas is just being difficult about some property decisions. It'll blow over. I promise you have nothing to worry about. More lies, more reassurances, more carefully constructed fiction designed to keep me compliant and unsuspecting. I squeezed his hand and smiled, letting him think I believed him, letting him think his secrets were still safe. That night, after Daniel had fallen asleep, I slipped out of bed and went down to my office. I pulled Margaret's folder from the filing cabinet and spread the contents across my desk, studying each photograph and document under the light of my desk lamp. There had to be something I was missing, some detail that would help me understand not just what had happened but how to use that knowledge strategically. One photograph caught my attention. It showed Daniel, Rachel, Oliver, and Zoe at what appeared to be a zoo or wildlife park. The four of them stood in front of an elephant enclosure, all smiling at the camera. What struck me was how comfortable they looked, how natural. This wasn't a stolen moment or a guilty secret meeting. This was a family outing, documented and preserved like any other family memory. I looked closely at the background and noticed something I had missed before. There were other people in the frame, blurred but visible. This photo had been taken in a public place where anyone might have seen them. Daniel was taking enormous risks every time he appeared with Rachel and the children in public, yet he kept doing it. Why? The answer came to me slowly. Daniel needed to be a real father to Oliver and Zoe, not just a financial supporter. He needed to take them to the zoo, attend their school events, coach their sports teams. The risk of exposure was worth it because the alternative was giving up that role entirely, and Daniel wasn't willing to do that. But this meant there had to be more evidence of his double life scattered throughout the community. More photographs, more witnesses, more opportunities for his two worlds to collide. The fact that they hadn't collided before now was either remarkable luck or extremely careful planning on Daniel's part. I opened my laptop and started searching social media more systematically, looking for any public posts that might feature Daniel with Rachel's children. I searched for the private school that Oliver and Zoe attended, looking through their public event photos. In a picture from last year's spring concert, I found Zoe in the back row of the choir, her blonde hair in braids. And there, in the audience, barely visible but unmistakable, was Daniel's profile. I downloaded the image and added it to my growing collection of evidence. Next, I searched for the Youth Soccer League, looking through their photo galleries from the past several seasons. I found dozens of pictures of Oliver on the field, and in several of them, Daniel was visible on the sidelines. In one photo from 2 years ago, he was high-fiving Oliver after a goal, the same way he high-fived Emma during her games. The photographer had captured a moment of pure joy between father and son, neither of them able to acknowledge that relationship publicly. The weight of what I was discovering pressed down on me. This wasn't just about Daniel's betrayal or Rachel's deception. This was about a systematic effort to hide the truth from an entire community, to maintain an elaborate fiction that required constant vigilance and coordination. How many times had Rachel and Daniel coordinated their schedules to make sure they wouldn't accidentally cross paths in ways that might raise suspicions? How many conversations had they had about keeping their stories straight, about what Oliver and Zoe were allowed to know, about how to manage the friendship between Emma and Oliver without revealing their true relationship? My phone buzzed with a text message, startling me in the quiet house. It was from Margaret, sent at nearly midnight. Found something else. Daniel has a safety deposit box at a bank branch across town, separate from your joint accounts. Might contain documents or assets you don't know about. Can get a court order to open it if you decide to file for divorce. A safety deposit box. I thought about what Daniel might have hidden there. More financial records? Legal documents? Perhaps letters or photographs that were too risky to keep at either house. The existence of the safety deposit box suggested there were still layers of this deception I hadn't uncovered, still secrets within secrets. I texted back, "How did you find out about the safety deposit box?" Her response came quickly. "Thomas Brennan has been very cooperative. He has access to a lot of Daniel's business records, and he's angry enough to share everything. Says Daniel cut him out of a major deal and he wants revenge." So Thomas's motivation for exposing Daniel wasn't moral outrage or concern for me. It was business revenge, a falling out between partners that had nothing to do with the human cost of Daniel's deceptions. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. On one hand, Thomas's information was invaluable. On the other hand, it meant I was caught in the middle of a business dispute that might have its own complications and agendas I didn't fully understand. I spent another hour documenting everything I had learned, creating a detailed timeline of Daniel's relationship with Rachel, noting every instance where his two families had unknowingly intersected. The picture that emerged was of a man who had been living this double life with increasing boldness over the years, taking more risks as he became more confident in his ability to maintain the deception. By 2 a.m, I had compiled enough evidence to destroy Daniel's carefully constructed world. But I still hadn't decided when or how to use it. The question wasn't whether to confront him, it was how to do it in a way that protected Emma, that ensured Rachel couldn't simply disappear with Oliver and Zoe, that guaranteed I would get the truth and not just another layer of lies. I climbed back into bed beside my sleeping husband, careful not to wake him. In the darkness, I listened to his steady breathing and thought about all the nights he had lain here beside me while carrying the weight of his other life. How did he sleep? How did he silence whatever conscience might trouble him? Or had he convinced himself that he was somehow doing the right thing, providing for 2 families, being there for all his children even if none of them knew the full truth? The next morning dawned gray and drizzly, typical Pacific Northwest weather for early October. I woke before my alarm, having slept fitfully despite my exhaustion. Daniel was already in the shower, and I could hear him humming something tuneless, a habit he had when he was in a good mood. I went downstairs and started the coffee, moving through the morning routine on autopilot. Emma appeared in the kitchen still in her pajamas, her hair a wild tangle around her face. "Mom, can Oliver come over after school today instead of Saturday?" His mom has to work late and she asked if he could hang out here until she gets off. My pulse quickened. This was an opportunity one hadn't anticipated. Of course, I said. Tell Rachel I'm happy to pick up both of you from school. Emma beamed and ran upstairs to get dressed, leaving me alone with my thoughts. Having Oliver in my house, watching him interact with Emma and Daniel, seeing the family dynamics that existed between father and son, even if neither of them could acknowledge it, that would tell me things that photographs and documents couldn't. When Daniel came downstairs, I mentioned the plan to have Oliver over. Rachel's working late, so I'm picking up both kids. Daniel nodded absently, pouring his coffee. That's fine. I should be home by 6, maybe we can order pizza. He showed no discomfort at the prospect of having his other son in his home, eating dinner at his table, playing with his daughter who was also his son's half-sister. The compartmentalization required to manage that situation without showing any stress was remarkable. After dropping Emma at school, I drove to the hospital but found myself parking in the lot without any desire to go inside. Instead, I sat in my car and called Margaret. I need to accelerate the timeline, I told her. I want to know everything you can find out about Rachel's current situation. Her finances, her lease or mortgage payments, her children's school records, everything. I need to understand how dependent she is on Daniel's support, and what leverage that gives me. Margaret was quiet for a moment. Rebecca, can I speak frankly? You're approaching this like you're building a case for court, which is good. But I'm sensing that you want something beyond just a divorce settlement. What's your endgame here? I watched the rain streak down my windshield, distorting the view of the hospital entrance. My endgame is making sure that Emma doesn't grow up thinking this kind of deception is normal or acceptable. My endgame is ensuring that Oliver and Zoe eventually know the truth about who their father is. And my endgame is making certain that Daniel and Rachel face real consequences for what they've done. Not just financial penalties but genuine accountability. Margaret sighed. Accountability is harder to achieve than you might think. Daniel can pay you a settlement, you can get custody arrangements for Emma, you can divide assets. But making him feel genuine remorse or forcing Rachel to admit her complicity, that's not something the legal system does well. She was right, but I didn't care. Just get me the information. I'll figure out what to do with it. After ending the call, I finally went into the hospital and started my shift. The morning was slower than usual, giving me too much time to think. Around 11, I received a text from Rachel. Thank you so much for watching Oliver today. This means a lot. He's been having such a good time with Emma lately. I'll pick him up around 7 if that works. I texted back an affirmation, then added, actually, why don't you stay for dinner when you pick him up? It's been too long since we've had a chance to talk properly. There was a long pause before her response came. That's very kind, but I don't want to impose. I could almost hear the nervousness in her text. It's no imposition at all. Daniel's bringing home pizza anyway. Plenty for everyone. I insist. Another pause, longer this time. Finally. Okay, thank you. I'll see you around 7. I smiled grimly at my phone. Tonight, I would have Daniel and Rachel in the same room, eating pizza around my kitchen table with their children, maintaining the fiction that they were merely acquaintances connected by their children's friendship. And I would watch them, studying every interaction, every careful avoidance of too much familiarity, every moment where they had to pretend to be strangers despite sharing 2 children and 7 years of deception. The afternoon dragged, each hour seeming to last forever as I anticipated what the evening would bring. I left the hospital at 3:30, plenty of time to pick up Emma and Oliver from school. The 2 children came running out together, laughing about something that had happened during recess. Oliver was tall for 12, already showing signs of the height he would probably inherit from Daniel. His dark hair was tousled and his backpack hung off one shoulder exactly the way Emma wore hers. They could have been any 2 friends, excited about an afternoon of playing together, except that they were siblings who had been denied the knowledge of their relationship. Thanks for picking me up, Mrs. Holloway, Oliver said politely as he climbed into the back seat beside Emma. My mom really appreciated it. I glanced at him in the rearview mirror. It's no trouble at all, Oliver. We're happy to have you. And your mom's joining us for dinner tonight, so you don't have to rush home. Oliver's face lit up. Really? That's awesome. Mom's been working so much lately, It'll be nice to have dinner with everyone. With everyone. Including the father he didn't know was his father. In the house of the family he didn't know was his family. The casual cruelty of the situation made my chest tight with anger. At home, the children immediately disappeared upstairs to Emma's room, their laughter echoing down the hallway. I stood in the kitchen and tried to decide what role to play tonight. Should I be the oblivious wife, cheerfully hosting my daughter's friend and his mother? Or should I drop hints, plant seeds of doubt, watch Daniel and Rachel scramble to maintain their composure? The sound of the garage door opening signaled Daniel's arrival home earlier than expected. He came through the door carrying his briefcase and a large pizza box, looking tired but pleased. Traffic was lighter than I expected, he said, setting down the pizza. Figured I'd grab dinner on the way. Oh, hey Oliver. His greeting to his son was casual, exactly the same tone he would use for any of Emma's friends. Oliver had come downstairs at the sound of Daniel's arrival. Hi, Mr. Holloway. Thanks for letting me hang out today. Daniel ruffled Oliver's hair affectionately, the gesture so natural and paternal that it would be invisible to anyone who didn't know the truth. Anytime, buddy. You and Emma staying out of trouble. The two children laughed and assured him they were working hard on their solar system project, then ran back upstairs. Daniel turned to me. Just Oliver tonight? I shook my head, opening the pizza box and examining the contents. Rachel's coming for dinner when she picks him up. I thought it would be nice to all eat together. I watched his reaction carefully. There was a microsecond of tension, a slight tightening around his eyes, before his expression smoothed into casual acceptance. Sure, that's fine. The more the merrier. For the next hour I set the table and prepared salad while Daniel changed out of his work clothes and checked emails. The domestic normalcy of it all felt surreal given what I knew, given what was about to happen when Rachel arrived and we all sat down together like one big happy family. At exactly 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Rachel standing on the porch, looking tired but put together in her dental hygienist scrubs with a cardigan thrown over them. Her smile was warm but I could see the wariness in her eyes. Hi, Rebecca. Thanks again for having Oliver over. I stepped back to let her in. Come on in, we're just about to eat. Daniel got pizza from that place on Morrison Street, the one with the amazing garlic knots. Rachel followed me into the kitchen, and I watched as she and Daniel greeted each other with carefully calibrated politeness. Not too warm, not too distant. Exactly the level of friendliness that would be appropriate between two people who barely knew each other beyond their children's friendship. Rachel, good to see you, Daniel said, his tone pleasant and neutral. Thanks for joining us. Rachel smiled. Thank you for having me. It's been a long day, and this is much nicer than going home to cook. I called up the stairs for Emma and Oliver, and soon we were all gathered around the kitchen table, paper plates loaded with pizza, the children chattering about school while the adults made polite conversation. I watched the dynamics carefully, noting the way Daniel and Rachel were scrupulously careful never to make eye contact for too long, never to sit too close together, never to display any sign of familiarity beyond what would be expected. But there were tiny cracks in the performance if you knew to look for them. The way Rachel automatically reached for the ranch dressing at the same moment Daniel did, suggesting a shared preference they shouldn't know about each other. The way Daniel laughed at something Oliver said with the kind of proud paternal warmth that went beyond what a family friend would show. The way Rachel tensed slightly whenever I asked Daniel a question about his day, as if worried he might inadvertently reveal something. So Rachel, I said conversationally, passing her the salad bowl. Oliver mentioned you've been working long hours lately. Is everything okay at the practice? Rachel nodded, spearing a piece of lettuce. Just busy season, you know how it is. Everyone trying to use their dental insurance benefits before the year ends. It's good for business but exhausting. I turned to Daniel. Didn't you invest in a dental practice a few years ago? Was it Rachel's practice? I can't remember. The question hung in the air like a grenade. Rachel's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Daniel took a sip of water before answering, his voice carefully casual. Yeah, I invested in the practice where Rachel works. Small business investment, nothing unusual. I nodded as if this was merely interesting information rather than a calculated test. That's right, I remember now. It's nice when investments work out well. The practice seems to be thriving. The adults fell into an uncomfortable silence while Emma and Oliver continued their animated discussion about whether Jupiter or Saturn was more interesting for their project. I let the silence stretch, watching Daniel and Rachel avoid looking at each other, watching them both avoid looking at me. Finally, Rachel spoke up. "Mrs. Holloway, Emma tells me you've been working at the hospital for a long time. Do you enjoy being a pharmacist?" It was a transparent attempt to change the subject, but I allowed it. "I do. There's something satisfying about helping people understand their medications, making sure they're taking care of themselves properly. Trust is such an important part of healthcare. Patients need to know they can rely on you to give them accurate information." I emphasized the word trust slightly, watching both Daniel and Rachel to see if they would register the implication. Daniel shifted in his seat, and Rachel became very interested in her pizza. The children remained oblivious, Oliver now showing Emma something on his phone, their heads close together as they laughed at whatever was on the screen. They looked so much alike, both with dark hair and Daniel's blue eyes, both with the same infectious laugh. How had I never noticed the resemblance before? After dinner, while the children went back upstairs to finish their project, I suggested we move to the living room for coffee. Rachel hesitated, clearly wanting to leave, but social convention made refusal difficult. Daniel looked equally uncomfortable but masked it better. I served coffee in our good china cups, the ones we usually reserved for special occasions. As I handed Rachel her cup, I spoke quietly. "I know about the house in Beaverton. I know about the 7 years of financial support. I know that Oliver and Zoe are Daniel's children." Rachel's cup clattered against the saucer. Daniel went completely still, his face draining of color. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Finally, Daniel found his voice. "Rebecca, I can explain." I held up my hand. "I don't want explanations. I want you both to understand something. Those children upstairs are siblings. They have a right to know each other as family, not just as friends. Emma deserves to know the truth. Oliver and Zoe deserve to know who their father really is." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "Please don't do this. Please don't destroy their lives." I looked at her steadily. "Their lives are already built on lies. I'm not destroying anything. You and Daniel did that years ago." Daniel leaned forward, his voice urgent. "Think about Emma. Think about how this will hurt her." The manipulation in his words was transparent now that I could see it clearly. "I am thinking about Emma. I'm thinking about raising her to value truth and integrity, something neither of you demonstrated." I pulled out my phone and showed them both a selection of the photographs Margaret had compiled. Daniel and Rachel at the zoo. Financial records. The timeline of deception. I have attorneys. I have evidence. And I have a choice to make about how to proceed. Rachel was openly crying now. "What do you want from us?" I set down my coffee cup carefully. "I want Daniel to move out tonight. I want you both to sit down with all 3 children within the next week and tell them the truth. I want joint custody arrangements that acknowledge reality instead of hiding it. And I want both of you to understand that if you ever lie to these children again, I will make sure everyone in this community knows exactly what you've done." Daniel started to protest, but something in my expression stopped him. After 7 years of deception, he finally recognized that he had lost control of the narrative. Rachel gathered her courage. "Can we at least decide together how to tell them? They need to hear this carefully." I considered this. "We can agree on the approach. But it happens within 1 week. No more delays, no more lies." The sound of footsteps on the stairs interrupted us. Emma and Oliver came bounding down, their project apparently complete. They looked so happy, so innocent, completely unaware that everything was about to change. But it had to change. Because the truth, however painful, was better than building a life on deception. I would help them through it, all of them, even Daniel and Rachel, who deserved no mercy. Because in the end, it wasn't about punishing the adults. It was about giving the children a chance at authentic relationships built on truth, rather than carefully constructed lies. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.